The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel, to understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Welcome to another episode of His Generation Podcast. You're listening to His Generation Podcast, a weekly exploration to biblical truth as we explore the Word of God. His Generation Podcast airs every Sunday morning, so grab your Bible, and here we go. Happy Sunday morning. Welcome to what I'm going to begin in a series of 31 weeks of Proverbs. There are 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, and so what I would like to attempt to do is to start to glean from each chapter per Sunday morning. There's a lot to learn in that. There's a lot of wisdom and very practical wisdom that we're going to learn from the Proverbs. So I thought that would be a great thing to take us through on His Generation Podcast. So starting with chapter 1 of Proverbs, we see right there that there is some indicators to understanding who wrote Proverbs or who is the author of Proverbs, and also too, what is Proverbs' thesis, if we can say it that in a very literary way. What is the thesis of Proverbs? Well, we have there in the very first paragraph, the author, right? These are the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel. So we are going to assume, obviously because of our faith, we're going to assume that Solomon is the author of Proverbs. And he is writing to his son, and his learning came from his father, David. So this is a family curriculum. Let's call it that. It's a family curriculum, and it's the most important curriculum because this sets down the foundation of a strong world view for those who, like it says in here, fear the Lord. And that's what we're going to understand. So my opinion, as an educator myself, I've studied at many different colleges and a university, and done seminary studying, and also done, have a couple of college higher education degrees. And what I've learned the most of, or the best learning that I've ever had, I should say it that way, is from the book of Proverbs, because there is so much practicality where you see there very clearly that you are combining not only the secular or the worldliness of the practical day-to-day, bills, marriage, temptation, how to interact in society, etc., but also, too, you combine that with the sacred or your faith in God, because it says right there, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. There it is. There's this combination, this marrying of the two, and that's what Solomon is going to instruct his child to do. Now, that is the overall thesis of what we're going to see as we get into Proverbs. The thesis means simply that there is a reality of God in His order of creation, and observing that creation, according to this section here, observing that creation will bring understanding and knowledge to now how you practically navigate through the day-to-days, especially in this context for the son, the younger person as they grow into maturity. They're going to need to know this foundational wisdom to properly navigate And then we get into the second part, which I'll begin in a minute, where he directly says, son, listen to me, listen to your mother, because you listening to me and you listen to your mother is as though the word of God is being given to you directly. So there's another observation of order that Solomon is obviously bringing about as we read through chapters 1 through chapters 9, if we're going to be exact with that. But it's this idea that there is order in God's creation, but not only in his creation, but in his family structure, where Solomon and his wife are the direct vessels to speak forth the word of God to their son specifically, but I would say children in general. So it's interesting to see those things come out, especially for, I would say, parents that are new at having children and raising children, and then also those of us that have had children and are now adults and are in that stage of going for the grandparents. So we understand those things, that God uses the parents as the main source to speak to the children. And that's what we'll see here. Now, all these things that I'm saying, to the person that doesn't believe in God, it's going to clash. It's going to be an opposition of what they think as a foundation. And that foundation that they hold and that I hold are what we call worldviews. And so I need to define that first, because there's going to be a lot of very practical observations that we see in life and how to navigate through those things. And those things are all very secular. In other words, whether you are a believer or a non-believer, those things you're going to see and, kind of resonate with you as truth. Does that make sense? So we'll see that as we go on. But I want to define what a worldview is, because that's going to give us understanding as we seek the wisdom to draw out the wisdom within Proverbs. We need to make sure that our worldview is in line with what this one paragraph says here, and the understanding of fearing the Lord and how that's the beginning of knowledge. Because you have to fear the Lord. That has to be your worldview. If you don't have that worldview, the rest of this is going to be junk to you. It's going to be, there's nothing going to be applicable about it. So you have to have that worldview. So a definition of worldview for those that are listening, I will speak it out, but for those that are actually watching this video, you have it up on your screen. I gave a definition of worldview as a foundational philosophy of life, the beliefs, attitudes, and values that cause a person to see the world in a certain way. It is a set of presuppositions or assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, who knows, but it is a set of presuppositions which we hold about the basic makeup of our world. And so that is what a worldview is. So a worldview that fears the Lord and understands that that's the beginning of knowledge, that's what you need to hold to go through these and actually gain or glean what the author is trying to instruct, not only for his son, but also too for us that are reading it, gaining an encouragement and a strength in our faith, and actually understanding what is wisdom and why it is important. So I want to lastly say this about a worldview. A worldview is a powerful force in shaping the actions, attitudes, and values of an individual or a society. So a worldview also applies not only for the individual, but for the society. So wisdom, for instance, is it is essential to living this life, not only for the individual, but the individual is participating in society. If you don't do it, according to the Proverbs, the outcomes will be folly. And that's a harsh statement, but that's the reality. And don't we see that in today's society? The chaos, the backwardsness, the folly that we see in a lot of today's society is based upon a worldview absent of the fear of the Lord. And that's why we see folly. But those that have a fear of the Lord, although they're not perfect either, will navigate much better, have an elimination of a lot of unnecessary drama and problems in this life. As the New Testament writers say, they will both have favor with God and man, right? That's the wisdom that we're talking about. I also included this statement: the wisdom that directs life is the same wisdom that created the universe. To surrender to God's wisdom is to put oneself in harmony with creation and the world around us. And that's why I said the New Testament writers would say that you will have favor both with God and man if you have the worldview that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and seeking out wisdom is that foundation that you need. Thus, the divine creation of the world is that there is no legitimate division between the sacred and the secular. I know some religious denominations of the Christian faith try to talk about that there is a separation between the sacred and the secular. And so I want to include that because I would challenge you, if you hold a denominational view that there is a definite separation between the sacred and the secular, I would challenge you to read the Proverbs, to look at those things and to see, and I'll try to unpack it too in my short times that I have here with you guys on His Generation podcast. But I would challenge you to see how definitely the author of Proverbs will show how those two things are one and the same. That there needs to be an observation of the creation, which is divine, which is by God. That's the worldview that you need to have. But observing that creation trickles down into everyday life and the order in everyday life that you apply. So if you don't look at what God has done and then try to utilize those tools and attributes into everyday life, you're going to have folly. But if you do look at those things and you trickle it down to everyday life, you will have a way to navigate, which is wisdom. Now, I know that seems to be a lot. It's a lot to meditate on. It's a lot to think about. But like I said, as we go through Proverbs, I will do my best to unpack that very relevant truth about wisdom that the author is trying to bring out for us, the readers. So let's continue on in the book of Proverbs, chapter 1. You see there, the author of Proverbs will go directly to whom his audience is to. Now, it says there the son, but if you really unpack its application, it's to anyone that's in the learning stage, if I can say it like that. Some authors and scholars that try to tackle in commentaries the book of Proverbs, they might even use this idea of a learner and a teacher, right? Where we have the father and mother here as the teachers and the child as the learner, and it's a curriculum. I agree with that on some perspective, but I'm not going to go into too many details about that or hold that view to its purest form. What I will do is say this, that it is looking as an audience towards a learner, and that this is someone that is experienced in application of life experiences, giving them the understanding of wisdom so that the learner will be sharper to navigate these things as they encounter the life experiences. And so that's the way we should look at it as the readers here. We are the learner. Now, with the learner, you're going to find that there's different classifications of that learner, right? You do see there the idea that there are those that are teachable and those that outright oppose God. So that's why it says there in the very first paragraph, or the thesis of Proverbs, the fool despises instruction. And so the fool is not only in this wisdom literature of Proverbs, but also in the Psalms, seen as someone that outright rejects God. They are not teachable, okay? Now, on the other hand, the ones that are teachable that you do see here are the ones that are simple, right? They're called simple. They're the ones that are teachable, but not as engaged as, let's say, someone here like the son, who has submitted themselves to the authority of their father, and they are ready to receive instruction, like a good learner, right? Like a one that desires to learn. That's the purpose of being a learner. And so you'll see those three categories as we go through Proverbs. So when you see the fool, that's someone that's just, they ain't teachable. They want to oppose God. They actually want to do the opposite of any kind of instruction that is based upon the Lord. The simple is the one that might not be as engaged, but there is a moment of teachability with them. And so there'll be a continual push towards that direction. The fool, they're going to get rejected. They'll get warning, but they'll get rejected. Whereas the simple, there will be some instruction at their level. And then ultimately the son is the one that gets the most direct, pure instruction. And that's where we want to strive for. We want to be, when it comes to our learning abilities, to be the son. And thus we see Jesus later on in the Gospels talk about wisdom will be justified by her children. That's the idea. The idea is that the ones that are directly with intention and desire to learn wisdom will be justified, or in other words, will be manifested according to the results of their actions. Because their actions will not be chaos, will not be folly, but it will be the delight of the Lord. So we see there the author saying, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." It's very Hebraic in the sense of Torah, right? The law of your mother, the instruction of the father, as the parental team there that God gives the family structure. He is going to use them to speak forth his word or his instruction to them. That's going to be the main source of those, of the learner, of the child, understanding the order of God. And it is like that. That's the way it is. So I always hear, younger people in the Lord that are still under the authority of their parents saying, "Oh, God told me I need to go here or I need to go there." I would say, well, how do your parents feel about that? And if they say, well, my parents don't agree and this and that, I would say, well, I'll tell you what, more than likely God's not telling you, okay? So let's just put that out there for thought. "For they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck." It's this very poetic way of saying that it's gonna dress you in riches. It's gonna dress you in something that is delightful. "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent." So he's already giving the instruction. "If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them up like shoal, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse." So poetically, this is the first temptation that pops out for the son, where you have someone saying, I got a scheme. That scheme is going to take advantage of those that are vulnerable to be taken advantage of, and we're going to rob what they have. And then when we rob what they have, we'll split it amongst ourselves. There's the deal. 50-50, But remember, there's no honor among thieves, by the way. Not a proverb, but very wise in its saying. And so we see there a very drastic way of first showcasing temptation for the son. And it's intentional in its pedagogy, or in its method of teaching. He says there, "My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from the path." So if the father's words are like the words of God, there's no option there. You must hear and obey. That's the beginning of understanding, of learning. You must hear and obey. You hear the instruction and you do it. It's not till you yourself come into a level of mastery where the application becomes your own, where you are in the level of teaching it. And I believe that's the stage where Jesus says, in this world, right, you're going to be like sheep in this world. However, remember say like sheep. You're not sheep, but you're like sheep. You're like sheep in this world. But be wise as the serpent and innocent or gentle as the dove. That's where you start to navigate as a master teacher rather than just a learner. But in the learning stage, you hear it, you do it, you obey it, and you make that a consistent action. And as that becomes consistent for you, as you bring mastery to it, when it becomes second nature to you, now you're ready to teach others. And more than likely, at that point, God has given you children and God has given you positions of authority. So he says there, do not walk in their way, keep your foot from their path, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain is the net is spread in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owners. So there's a lot of repetitive words there when it comes to the idea of life. Remember, this is poetry. So if there's repetitive words, there's something to be understood with that. He says there, the original thing was saying, hey, let us shed blood, right? Let's get people and swallow them up alive like Sheol and make them go down to the pit. So death and destruction was what they wanted to do to others. However, the reality is that they're doing it to themselves. Because when you do not fear the Lord, you will see a lot of what I would call this very natural sense of irony. You know, some people would say, oh, it's karma. It's not karma. It's the natural order of things, right? Jesus said it this way. He says, you know, when Peter brought out his sword and ready to fight off the temple guards there in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus said to Peter, whoever lives by the sword will die by the sword. And that's just a reality of life. So these thieves, these hooligans, as they say over there in the UK, these people are looking to cause trouble and shed innocent blood. They themselves are actually bringing it upon themselves. That's the idea behind it. There's your wisdom, son. There's your wisdom. But you're not going to discover that wisdom. I will tell you it, the Father would say, but until you obey my words and avoid them, keep your foot from their path. Do not run to that type of evil. Then you will truly see the end of those who reject God and actually go towards to destroy others. They actually will destroy themselves. So there's your first lesson, son. And that's for us to kind of put into our little minds of understanding and meditation. Because as we go out through chapters 10 through 31 of Proverbs, you're now going to start to see different cases given of how this applies. This universal truth of whoever lives by the sword dies by the sword. Whatever a man sows, so shall he reap. Like that kind of universal truth. The son needs to understand that. If I am the son, if I am the learner, if I'm hearing this for the first time, I'm thinking to myself, if I do what my father says to do, I'm probably going to live longer. So I'm going to do what my father says to do, because notice all those verses about life. He's telling you, the inference is if you don't hear what I'm saying, your life will be shortened. And we all want to live longer, right? So you listen to the wisdom, or you listen to, in this case, the father as a young child, as a learner. And then it goes on to say this, and this is where wisdom begins to be personified. And you'll see that throughout the chapters here, in chapters, especially chapters 1 through 9. Wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open square. She cries out in the chief concourses. At the openings of the gates in the city, she speaks her words. So wisdom personified is to be discovered. Where is wisdom to be discovered? Apparently not in the ivory towers of academia, right? But they're in the common practical day-to-day life places. The market, the beginning of town, the open squares, it says there. So that's where you will see, or that's where you will find wisdom calling out. And look what wisdom calls out. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? Remember, these people are teachable. These people are teachable. They're not the fool. Second part. For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. And those are the ones that can't learn. So on the very base level, simple ones can learn, the fools cannot learn because they just hate knowledge. But the simple ones, they're still getting a call out, where you'll see as we go on here, the fools, what they get is a rejection. Continues on. Turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you, because I have called and you refused, but I've stretched out my hand and no one regarded, because you all disdained my counsel, and would have you none of my rebuke? I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm, and your destruction comes like a whirlwind. When distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel and despised my every rebuke. Therefore, they shall eat the fruit of their own way and be filled to the full of their own fancies. For the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. Whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. Wow, that is heavy, heavy stuff. Now, let's unpack that a little bit, and we'll close with this. So, first and foremost, wisdom is there in the places of lots of travel, of a lot of societal interaction. She's not hiding. She's very open. She's crying out. She's giving a warning to the simple. Come. I will fill you full of knowledge. I will give you all these things. Now, wisdom can't be bought. Wisdom is earned, but it can't be bought. You have to create a lifestyle, not only starting with, like we said, a worldview, but also, too, a diligency to seek wisdom. We have many scriptures in the Old Testament talk about seeking wisdom early. There's this idea of there's a discipline that needs to take place for one who wants that richness of wisdom. You can't buy it. You have to earn it, but it's earned through the element of time, humility, and the willingness to learn. Now, those that reject it, the fool who said, I do not choose to fear the Lord. When it comes time to their calamity, this is the unfortunate thing. Wisdom does not answer at that point. Wisdom rejects. And that's the reality. Harsh things. However, I would like to classify myself and those that are listening right now as those of whoever listens, because we are listening right now to wisdom. If you hear my voice as I start to unpack Proverbs, you're listening to wisdom. This is not me and my innovativeness. This is me just repeating what I have learned from the Proverbs over the many years and have taken to heart and have practiced in many ways, moment to moment, year by year, day by day. So what does it cause? What's the outcome? Dwelling safely, security, right? And fear of the Lord rather than the fear of evil. And don't we need that in today's world, people? And that's what I hope to give to you as we go out in today's world and apply this wisdom as we're sitting here learning this wisdom. So for the next, fingers crossed, next 31 weeks, we'll unpack Proverbs chapters 1 through 31 as we glean from each chapter. Now, let me just leave you with this closing thought. Like I said in the beginning, and I'm just going to restructure it a little bit different, a little bit more of a plain English, right? Ordinary life and the life of faith are not two separate spheres, but one unified experience of God's creation. All of life is regarded as a seamless fabric according to the implications of the author of Proverbs. And we need to see that, especially when we get to chapter 8, we'll see it the most. And then when we pass through chapter 9 and start to go into chapters 10 through 29, you'll see how that really applies and how that's really the implication of the author of Proverbs. So thank you for joining me this Sunday morning on His Generation Podcast. Have a blessed week. Thank you for joining us at His Generation Podcast. To receive more information about the podcast, please visit our website, hisgeneration.net, or check out our YouTube channel, His Generation Podcast, for the video format of this broadcast. His Generation is a production of Generation Mars Media, located in Orange County, California.